again to my library. It's nothing quite like being drawn into a book from the very beginning, so I'm going to read from The Dead Children's Story, Winnwood Beach Amusement Park. It began in a darkly magical place called Kansas City, but it wasn't in the bright, happy Kansas of the Wizard of Oz. This Kansas City was a little town in Missouri, which is pronounced almost exactly like misery. And it was so far from Kansas City, Kansas, that a person could walk all day and never even reach Kansas. And if you started out from Kansas City, Missouri in those days, and didn't know exactly how to go, you could just walk forever and never get anywhere at all. There was a place in Kansas City called Winnwood Beach, which seemed like a very happy place, even though it was in misery. From April to October every year, people would come from simply everywhere just to be at Winnwood Beach among the jazz bands and the dancers and carnival rides and the butterflies and the lightning bugs. They would swim and dance and drink and smoke and sweat until their bodies gave out, and then they would pass out on the beach, listening to the fading creaks and squeals from the last roller coaster ride of the day. Or, if they were very lucky, they could retire to a little cottage on the beach. But some people at Winnwood Beach were very unlucky, like Cecil, the son of the local fortune teller and a shape-shifting man called a contortionist, who once came to Winnwood Beach with a railroad circus. Cecil wasn't right, but he was a good sort of fellow. He was a young man whose neck was so long that his head leaned over to the side almost all of the time, and he was born without collarbones, so his shoulders tended to slump in toward one another. He could even touch them together in front of his chest, especially when he was very cold and shivery. Cecil was tall and lanky, and when he talked, which wasn't all that often, his arms would wave around to meet with many little accidents, sweeping things from the manteltop, tilting picture frames on their hangers, and knocking decorations off the walls. By the time he was 17, Cecil had shattered 91 years' worth of mirrors and countless things of lesser consequence. On the particular day that the story begins, business was unusually slow. So Cecil was unfortunate enough to find himself across the table from Esma, his mother, the bitter old fortune-teller. She was exerting control over his mind and emotions by forcing a free psychic reading upon him. Aside from telling fortunes, Esma also occupied herself as the town midwife and harangued Cecil through every step of each day, so she kept a very busy schedule. The skull in the center of the little round fortune-telling table had belonged to a Romanian gypsy. That is to say, it originally grew atop the shoulders of a Romanian gypsy named Isabella. That is an entirely different story altogether, however, for Isabella lived to a ripe old age and made plenty of good use of that skull which had grown above her shoulders before she died. But the shoulders that this story is concerned with are Cecil's shoulders, and the dead people that this story concerns are the dead children, not old Romanian gypsies. The fortune-teller's table was made of dark, ancient wood, and traces of golden symbols that had long ago been painted upon it were still visible. An astute observer might have made out the signs of the zodiac in its markings, through the grainy wear, the crackled waxy finish, and the ground-in dust of ages. The skull at the table's center was as slick and polished as a crystal ball, which is what it was being used for. And it had been rubbed so thin that the light bulb mounted inside of it shone through in red and gold swirls that seemed to fold in the smoky, incensed air of the wagon. Esma looked into it and then looked back up at Cecil's slouching frame. The emerald jewels of her eyes, set into a quilt of wrinkles, betrayed obvious disappointment in her son. "Isabella says nothing for you." She liked to refer to the gypsy's skull as Isabella. "You don't merit comment." Or, the R purred like a raccoon. You have no future. Tell me, Cecil, do you think that you will die? Her accent was both authentic and contrived. In other words, she really was a foreigner to Winnwood Beach, but she was trying to sound Romanian, which she was not. Esma had come to America as a child, and until she was a teenager, she had a Russian-American accent. She thought that gypsies from Romania were more romantic, so she faked their accent when she began telling fortunes as a teenage girl. By this point, she had been using the fake accent so often, for so many years, that she no longer could speak without it, even in old age. Esma leaned leeringly over the table. Do you think of it often? Do you dream your own death? Give me your hand! Esma was accustomed to speaking to a tongue-tied audience, and offered no pause for Cecil to respond. Bony hands and black nail polish flailed out of the oversized sleeves of her ornate gold and purple robe. She grasped for Cecil's hand, trapping it as he recoiled and pushing it flat on the tabletop, palm facing up. Let me see the lines of your life unfolding. Love, success, longevity! Again her eyes frowned, but this time she was somewhat shocked. Cecil! You have too few lines on your palm. At first I thought you were too young and soft to show them, but you're a young man now. You heave dirt with the shovel and hack wood with the axe. Why do you suppose your palms show no future? No longevity line at all. It's a shock you've lived this long. Answer quickly. What is the most terrible thing you've ever seen? She spat. I think it was a lightning bug that lost its wings. It flew too near the campfire. Cecil's startled voice fell into a whisper. And a tongue of flame singed off its wings. It was the most beautiful thing for an instant, plummeting with its wings all aglow, wafting and shining. And when it touched down right in front of me, it just crawled and glowed, and would never know what was wrong. Why do they fly into the fire, Mother? Esma's response was immediate. Trying to overreach their station, defiant creatures. Icarus flying too near the sun. No, tell me something more terrible, horrible, she said, gripping his hand painfully tight. Hers was a magic of the mind, a sort of magic that came from understanding people from the inside. She was not a charlatan in the traditional sense. In fact, because they were so real, the fortunes Esma told were downright spooky. Come now, speak! I can't, Mother, I can't. Don't you want to know what will become of you, Cecil? No, Mother. Cecil breathed softly. Just then, the bright face of a little girl appeared at the door, framed by mounds of blonde ringlets. And that is the end of the first chapter. And now you know a little bit about Winnwood Beach as it could have been. Thanks so much for spending a little time with me, and find out more about the Dead Children's Story on Amazon.com or at the publisher's site, Pharaoh's Library.